Is the 80-20 rule the best way to organize your endurance training? This is what we're going to talk about in this video. I've had quite a few questions recently about this 80-20 rule and the idea of spending 80% of your time at low intensity and 20% of your time or 20% of your sessions at high intensity, and whether or not this is the best way to improve your endurance. So this is what we're going to talk about in this video. I think that we have to be careful with applying rules to every single situation, right? The way that I see the 80-20 rule, I don't see it as a rule. I see it as a model. And like our friend George Box said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And that 80-20 model is useful in some contexts, not all contexts. I'll give you a very basic and very simple example. If you're a beginner in endurance training, you've never really endurance trained, but you're trying to develop your endurance, but you only have, say, 3 sessions to train in the week. So what should you do? Should you do 3 low intensity sessions and then the following week, then you're allowed to maybe do a high intensity session because you've done your 4 low intensity sessions to begin with? I don't think that's the right approach. For example, for a beginner, if you can train 3 times a week, I would suggest doing 1 low intensity, 1 medium intensity, 1 high intensity sessions in the week. And that would be on a bike because if you're starting with the run, then and you're a beginner in running, then I probably would start with mostly low intensity and build up the intensity as you go, and actually not do any high intensity running before you've done quite a bit of low and quite a bit of medium intensity, because running has the impacts that come with it. And if your body's not trained to tolerate the amount of impact that running brings, it can bring on quite a few issues pretty quickly. So when I talk about endurance training in general, I like to think about the bike as the primary modality to think about endurance, simply because we don't have those mechanical constraints. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't run and that running is dangerous. I'm just saying that you should be smart and you should approach running knowing that it has a higher mechanical load compared to cycling, and that if your body's not prepared to take on that load, then you might experience some issues. But back to our main question, 1 low, 1 medium, 1 high intensity. This is how I would distribute intensity during the week for a beginner. And this is also what's going to allow you to explore those different types of training sessions. And it's important to know how to hold low intensity. It's important to know how to do a tempo session, how to do a threshold session, how to do a high intensity session. So you should be well versed in all those different aspects. But obviously, once you reach a certain level, well, that medium intensity and that high intensity is going to cost you a little bit more than it did when you were a beginner. So you can't do as much of it as you did before. And one way you can think about it is that the low intensity training allows you to gain or save up coins. And those coins are what you're going to spend on your medium, your high, and your very, very high intensity sessions later on. And the higher level, the higher the cost of those medium, high, and very high intensity sessions. So the higher your level, the more coins you need to save up, you need to accumulate with that low intensity before you can do the high intensity sessions. So maybe that 80-20 rule is a good rule once you've reached a certain level of training and your high intensity brings on a pretty significant cost to your recovery, to your organism. And at that point, yes, you need to do more low intensity to counterbalance the cost of the high intensity. But 80-20 might not be the exact split that you need, right? Maybe you're training 4 times a week. So what should you do? Do you cut a session in half? Do you wait until the next week to do your high intensity session? If you're doing 4 sessions a week, maybe one day you can do 2 high intensities, and then the following day you can do 1 high intensity, and alternate between those 2 and 3 low intensity sessions. So kind of find an in between there. And maybe that is going to work at certain times of the year when you want to emphasize training with a polarized distribution. Polarized meaning low and high intensity with very little or no training in between. But at other times of the year, you're going to need to build your base, and you'll want to approach training in a more pyramidal way. So in that case, we'd have some low and some medium intensity with very little high intensity. And in that case, the split might be quite different than 80-20. Maybe you're on a 50-50 or on a 60-40. And that, again, is going to vary from week to week. Are you in a loading phase? Are you in deload phase? Are you in a peaking phase? All those things are going to change all those numbers. So the 80-20 rule is one way to conceptualize the split between low and high intensity, but it shouldn't be the only number that you have in your head, and you shouldn't live and die by this number. Again, all models are wrong, some are useful, and in the case of that one, you need to use it carefully in the right context. So to conclude this little video on the 80-20 model rule idea is that you need to split up your sessions intelligently based on your level, based on what type of training you do, whether you're on the bike, whether you're running, and which time of the year we find ourselves in, because your training should vary throughout the year. If you're doing the exact same training week in and week out for 52 weeks of the year, maybe you're progressing this year, maybe you'll progress next year, but pretty quickly that's going to come to a stop, and you're going to have to vary your training and vary your approach to training if you want to keep improving. And I'm a big proponent of exploring all different intensities throughout the year, low, medium, high, and very high intensity, intelligently in dedicated training blocks based on your goals, based on your sports, based on your profile, based on when your competition is. And this is what training is all about. Thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.